To introduce Suzanne Kavanagh. Suzanne's a founder of Friends of the Foundry, who were recently successful in their campaign to stopping the demolition of the Dominion Foundry building. Suzanne's a founder of Ontario Place for All, which began in December 2018, once the province declared the current state of Ontario Place is disgraceful and there's nothing that can be saved. Suzanne is also a former board member of Waterfront for All, and she's been involved in a variety of campaigns since moving to Toronto from Waterloo in 1996. She serves on the working group for the First Parliament site and is a recipient of the Queen's Jubilee Medal. And Suzanne is also a past president of the St. Lawrence Neighborhood Association, which I was also a delegate and member of in the earlier part of this century. So she's a fellow St. I'm a former resident of the wonderful and great St. Lawrence neighborhood, and Suzanne continues to be very much involved and lives there in everything that's there. We're also pleased to welcome back Ken Greenberg, urban designer, teacher, writer, former director of the urban design and architecture for the city of Toronto and principal of Greenberg Consultants. Ken has worked for, I can't believe it, Ken, you look so young. You've worked for 4 decades and has played a pivotal role in public and private assignments in urban settings throughout North America and Europe. It's too much to describe. We'd have to spend about an hour and a half covering Ken's accomplishments. He works at the intersection of urban design, architecture, landscape mobility, and social and economic development in cities as diverse as Toronto, Hartford, Amsterdam, New York, Boston, Montreal, Ottawa, etc. He's a member of the Order of Canada and was awarded a Doctor of Laws honoris causa from the University of Toronto. He's an author of 2 fabulous books, and he has been a past speaker with and past member of Waterfront for All, and it's great to have you back with us this evening, Ken. And it's also a pleasure to welcome this evening Eric Klaver. Eric is a partner and senior landscape architect with Plant Architects. Eric joined Plant in 2013 to lead the firm's team of landscape architects. He's known for his thoughtful and sustainable landscape designs to celebrate local culture and having cultivated a focus and interest in the ways of art, science, and nature and culture and how they intersect with the design environments. He specializes in the design of regional scale projects, including college courtyards, rooftop gardens, and urban plazas, as well as larger scale projects such as watersheds and ecosystems. Eric's a former associate and senior landscape architect of Moriyama and Tashima Planners, and has also served as a partner of Elysium Structures and Landforms, and as the sole proprietor of Track Landscapes. And it is a pleasure for us to have you with us this evening, Eric, and we will look forward to hearing your presentation in short order. It is also my pleasure to welcome the chair of Waterfront for All, our esteemed friend and colleague, Ed Hoare. Ed played a pivotal role and was involved with many others who's in the successful No Jets campaign for No Jets at the Bishop Island Airport. And Ed is a passionate kayaker and has a passionate interest in all things to do with Toronto's waterfront.
All right, that's super great.
There you are, Ed.
Okay, so we'll just leave that one on for a minute and I'll just get going here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a very quick hop, skip, and a jump through the history of Ontario Place, 50-year history, and get into the current events just so we're kind of on the same page. Ontario Place, as we all know, opened in 1971. It's surprising when you look back at how quickly it was announced, designed, and built. It was announced by Premier John Robarts in August 1968 at the opening of the CNE that year. About a little over 2.5 years ago, it opened in May 1971, famously designed by Eb Zeidler. Consisted, of course, of the 5 famous pods on stilts, which originally had displays relating to the province of Ontario. Later, the pods became a venue for private events under the name Atlantis. There was, of course, the Forum with a capacity of about 3,000, a music venue where there was additional room for people to sit on grassy mounds around a revolving stage. Many of us of a certain age will remember it very fondly. There was the Cinesphere, a great big geodesic dome that had the world's first permanent IMAX projector, showed movies like The North of Superior, various bars and eateries. It was all very exciting. Cost about $29 million at the time. I'm going to very roughly estimate that would be about 10 times that amount in today's dollars. It ran a deficit of about 2.2 million first year. Children's Village was added the next year, expanded in subsequent years. A water play area was added in 1973. About 10 years, almost exactly to the day, 10 years after the opening day of Ontario Place, Canada's Wonderland opened on May 23rd, 1981. After that, it appeared that Ontario Place perhaps became a little more Canada's Wonderland-like. There were numerous attractions of an amusement park kind of nature added, particularly on the West Island. There was the Atom Blaster, Mars, the Wilderness Adventure, which was a kind of a water plume ride. In 1980, there was Ontario North Now, which consisted of interconnected silo-like buildings, which eventually became Mega Maze. There was the tipping bucket, the splash pad, all kinds of, in particular, water slides were added in the 1990s. Attendance, well, the deficit tended to hover around 2.5 million up to around almost 5 million per year, roughly. Attendance declined from around 3 million annually in the 70s to 2.5 million in 1985. By 2004, it was about 1 million. In the last season, it was a little bit over half a million. In 2010 and 2011, about $10 million was put into it. A new water slide was created called Topsy Turvy, installed in 2011, which was never in fact used by the public and eventually sold to Canada's Wonderland. New sound system and spruce up for the Cinesphere. Something called an Eco Learning Center was added, as well as Echo Beach, a small concert venue. Nevertheless, although attendance did improve somewhat, the government decided to close the venue pending further development in 2012, except for the music venue, the marina, and the Atlantis entertainment venue, which was in the pods. Nothing happened for a number of years. There was an advisory panel on revitalization chaired by John Tory. The site sat more or less empty. New proposals were sought by the Liberal government in 2018. Doug Ford became premier in June 2018. One of the first things he did was to dissolve Ontario Place Corporation, meaning that in effect decisions would be made directly by the cabinet. There was some suggestion at the time that the provincial government might favor getting rid of the site or privatizing it or turning it into a casino, which had originally been suggested by the Ontario Gaming Commission in 2012. The community vigorously opposed that and ultimately quashed that. In May 2019, the government issued a call for development proposals. That process went ahead. There were bidders, but the public didn't know what they were. Government called for big, bold ideas. And Doug Ford announced that 3 partners had been selected in a speech at Ontario Place on July 30th, 2021. So the 3 partners we're going to talk about tonight. And before I get to them, I'm just going to talk about some of the other stuff that also we were told at the July 30th announcement, we were told there would be consultations. They in fact didn't happen, but what did happen was an information session on October 13th, 2021, which was last Wednesday, which added not a lot of substance, but we did get brief talks from some of the principals of the partners and of government representations. And we got some graphic visualizations, which I'll go through in a minute. So we learned that Infrastructure Ontario was leading the process together with the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries. The selection process was alignment with the government's vision, 2, viability, presumably financial viability, 3, delivery certainty. I guess that means will they go bust in the meantime? And what are the costs and benefits to the province? And finally, that there be no condos or casino. We were told that 2/3 of Ontario Place would be free and open to the public. The site is about 155 acres, but that includes a lot of water. And that the Cinesphere pods would be kept. and would be integrated into the development, whatever that may mean. They will be brought up into a safe condition, but we have no information on what they will be used for, if anything. We don't know how much all of that will cost. The government has pledged to make the property development ready for the private sector partners, which seems to mean there will be various studies to prepare the site. They will assess what are the critical repairs regarding safety, fixing the walls, roofs, the electrical systems. There might need to be soil remediation, shoreline sewers, upgrades to roads and bridges. There will be a heritage impact assessment, and we're promised it will all be a holistic plan, but we've been given no details on what that means. The time frame is surprisingly lengthy. We're looking at shovels in the ground apparently around 2027, 6 years from now, completion around 2030. There will be public consultations in 2022, next calendar year, extending apparently into 2023. 500 million will be invested by the partners, plus an unknown amount by the provincial government, namely the taxpayers, which will be geared towards making the site development ready. We haven't heard anything about whether the pods in the Sinosphere will be animated or there'll be other attractions or not. The government has said that it expects 5 million visitors, which means it will exceed, if true, the 3 million level that was reached in the 1970s by a considerable amount. There'll be about 3,600 new jobs, some of them construction jobs, some of them ongoing. There's a public survey, which I think Suzanne may be talking about later, where you can go online and say what you'd like to see at Ontario Place by, I think it's October 28th. So the three partners are, and here we look at our graphic, Live Nation, you can see in red outline. So that's essentially the operator of the amphitheater now. So their territory is marked in red. As you can see, it's the music venue. What they intend to do seems more like a kind of a continuum of what they're already doing. They say they will redevelop the existing amphitheater and expand capacity from 16,000 as it is now to around 20,000. And they will make it all year round. So there'll be 9,000 people in winter. This will be done through operable exterior walls. Can we see the next slide? I think it's got something of a visualization of that. Not very sophisticated. Could somebody move it to the next slide?
Yes, I will. In just 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to let a couple of people in who were stuck, so you'll just have to bear with me for 1 second, and I will do exactly that as soon as I get back to where I need to be.
Okay, no, that's no problem.
Sorry about that. I know this is where you want to have a huge tech staff at the same time doing everything we need, right?
Way up to
sorry. I'm gonna I'm gonna stop the share and reshare it. I'll just be right with you on that. Sorry.
I'll just keep going.
Yeah, just a second. Here we go. Sorry, hang on. Yeah, just keep going and we'll catch up with you, okay?
Another partner is Eco Recreo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is based in Montreal, family-based business. It operates recreational facilities by the water at the Port of Montreal, which I've seen in many other locations, and they promise us an affordable all-season family-friendly adventure park, aerial obstacle courses, net-based aerial adventure, zip lines, climbing walls, and an escape room, and there will be rental of segways, quad cycles, canoes, and kayaks. And finally, we get to Therme, which is an Austrian company with spas in many places around the world. And they were produced the best images, beautiful images, which we'll see in a minute, of pools and glass walled buildings with swooping ceilings and so on, palm trees, ladies draped in towels. And they promise an all-season family-friendly health and wellness experience. Okay, so there we see the, this is the forum, the image we got of the forum. Of the Budweiser stage. There's the Therme thing. It's not too distinct, but it seems to be glass-walled, beautiful swooping buildings with a lot of water and plants in there. So they're saying there will be pools and water slides, botanical spaces to relax, publicly accessible gathering spaces, parkland, gardens, and beaches, and immersive arts experiences, and fine food as well. Let's flip a couple more of the images that were presented. Beautiful pool. Seems to be a very high ceilinged room with sweeping glass roofs and so on. Next one. I'm not sure if that's the same building or not. It's a very elegant building. These are walkways that seem not to be there now.
Yeah, that's a Therme. It's a little indistinct on the picture, but that would be an entrance towards the Therme spa concept.
Right. So the partners will invest $500 million. We don't know who will invest what exactly. But it would appear that Therme will have by far the largest investment, because they seem to be the only one that's going to be, well, the one that's building these new buildings from scratch. And they certainly look very elegant in the pictures. Can we go back to the first one that just shows the territories, if we can call it that? So the West Island is the blue one. That's the Therme group one with the beautiful spa buildings. Eco Recreo will be this area on the south edge and they didn't give us any visualizations of what it would look like, but they did give us photographs of some of their existing installations, which are kind of zip lines and aerial adventures and so on. Live Nation at the top, and then we've got Trillium Park to the right. And some areas which it appears are not in the territory of any of the three partners, including the pods and the Sinosphere. And as I said, we don't know what will happen with those, but the government is committed at least to making them so that they're safe, i.e. not actually falling down. And that's about all we know, I would say, of substance right now.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
There she is.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hello.
There you are.
She's got a beautiful flower beside her, which is good. Okay, take it away.
All right, thanks. So the current state of Ontario Place is disgraceful, and there is nothing that can be saved. Those were the words from the special advisor, Jim Janeau, in December of 2018. So that was the impetus for us to start Ontario Place for All. And as Edward mentioned, we started this at a dining room table actually in December of 2018. And then we got together and started this rally, which took place in January of 2019. And currently we have a membership list in the thousands and regularly send updates of what is happening or not happening, as it took so long to hear from the provincial government as far as their plan. From there, we aligned with the ACO, also known as the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. And through that, we were able to get onto the World Monuments Watch. And then from there sprung our association with the Daniels School of Architecture, who started the Future of Ontario Place. And so our advocacy for this special spot continues to grow. When the special advisor uttered those words, we quickly had to educate the government and advise that Trillium Park and the William Davis Trail were opened in June 2017, and that more people pre-COVID visited this space than the CN Tower. This summer, it was a sanctuary for so many families, and we also have groups of swimmers who swim there each and every single day. Is the rest of the park in need of repair? Yeah. And like any asset, whether it's a park or your new car, it must be maintained. In August of 2019, Ontario Place for All commissioned a study from HRNA, thanks to our friendship with them and Ken Greenberg. And it spoke about the economic benefits of a public space. And so just some of the examples are speaking about the real estate benefits and the public spaces and how they increase development value. And so if you look at that site today, the housing that's just gone in around that area is fantastic. So we have Fort York, we have Garrison Creek and Liberty Village. The tourism benefits, so the idea about public spaces attracting tourists and their dollars, and also social and cultural benefits. So this idea of creating healthy lifestyles, a social cohesion, and a quality of life. And the other one that's also going to be coming back once we get around this COVID corner is the talent for attracting. So the idea of attracting and retaining residents, workers, and employers to this area. So it was mentioned earlier in the intro, both through Ed and Edward. I'll just take a little bit of a sidetrack and talk a bit about the Foundry campaign, which started in January of 2021. And so the story there, in case you haven't heard, was that the provincial government had a firm come on site January 14th, and they were going to demolish the Dominion Foundry buildings, which is over in the East End, over in the West Don Lands area. So what happened there, we took legal action. We sued the province and we won. And now the province has assured us and the city of Toronto that they will consult with us as they bring on a new development partner. So we have their ear, and we will keep the pressure on to ensure that they keep their word. Again, going back to the spring or May, actually, Ontario Place for All held another rally, only this time it was virtual, as we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Ontario Place. In the meantime, back at the ranch with the province, we are still waiting to find out what the next steps are with this RFP. And so off and on, we've reached out to the province many, many times, and they've been very slow in communication back to us. We knew the RFP had closed and that the province wanted something what they call, to use Ed's term in quotes, world class. And well, through our campaign, one of the things we started to realize is that we're changing the channel, and that we're no longer hearing them use the word, it's disgraceful. And we started to hear positive language that the Cinesphere and the pods would be maintained. And this is a special thanks to the World Monuments Watch. The park and the trail would be intact. That was also a change in their language. And we think that that's also part of our campaign. And thanks to the government for realizing that regardless of which government built this park, to throw away $30 million would be wasteful if not observed. So this afternoon, I had coffee with my dear friend, David Crombie, and I said that through this presentation tonight and working with the province that I would still be nice. And he said, that's fine. But he said, you still have to keep your dukes up. So we'll keep doing that as well. So we were finally given the news, as Ed mentioned, that we got the news at the end of July, as far as here are the world-class proposals and that they had arrived. And just going back to a bit to Premier Robot's comments about this dream, and that it was to build something that celebrated Ontario. And yet we were just curious to see that what we're looking at for this dream for Ontario with this current government is to have a spa that is from Austria, an entertainment firm that's from the States, and a recreation company from Quebec. So I think in one of our press releases that we sent out, we said goodbye pine trees and hello palm trees. So again, we need to make sure that the province understands that this is a public space. And Eric's going to talk even more about it's a public park, and that these proposals coming out still leave us with lots of questions, such as how will the $500 million be spent? Who will maintain the Cinesphere and the pods? How will the heritage conservation plan be carried out? And as with any large scale development, there is a master plan, but here we see what appears to be 3 independent solutions and still not looking at the entire site holistically. We need folks not just to go to the province website, but to fill out the survey and to really provide feedback for the direction that's being taken now. So the survey is one thing, but we think we still would need you to write a separate letter and to tell the province this is not what we are looking for. Years ago, there was a threat for, I think some of you might have heard about the famous Ferris wheel, the monorail, and the mega mall, and that's where we started Code Blue. So just stepping back to the Foundry for just a moment, we stopped the province from demolishing heritage industrial buildings and reinforcing that heritage is not to be erased, but to be embraced. And yet another campaign appears on the horizon with the first Parliament site to ensure that the public park does not disappear. So we need you to get out there now and let your voice be heard, because the good news is that we are confident the province is listening. And so Ken's going to speak further about how we need to expand on this idea about hitting the reset button and getting them to rethink where we are right now. We just don't want to settle, and we want the proponents to make sure that they are more visionary. We know that there is no one silver bullet for this, but this park can be animated with so many events and year-round opportunities. So things like Winterlude and Foods of the World and so on. So the idea is, can we go back to what we had 50 years ago? No. And when we started this campaign, a lot of people were very nostalgic about, they were there when Carlos Santana was there, and they were there again with Carlos Santana and their grandchildren. And so there's lots of really great memories, but I think we need now to get serious and start making some new ones, and to look at some plans that are going to take us to the next 50 years. So we need to be flexible, and we need to allow for flexible programming and for income at all levels and all ages and stages. So the final thought that I've got is that this idea about Infrastructure Ontario taking the lead, I think for them, I would offer them the opportunity to, rather than reinvent the wheel, to work with a partner, Waterfront Toronto, and to bring them to the table. Waterfront Toronto is a tripartite agency, and 1/3 of that is the provincial government. They are award-winning, they're world-renowned, and they're the best stewards we have for the waterfront. They are the ones who can continue to stitch together this waterfront and involve all the stakeholders who need to be at the table, not just the developers. They are world-renowned for public engagement. So I just want to stop there, because otherwise, for people who know me, know I can go on about a campaign and about next steps. But those are just sort of my opening comments, and I'll just end with that for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks very much. Very much appreciate it. Next up, it is our pleasure to have Ken Greenberg with us once again. Ken, there you are. How are you?
I'm just fine. I'm going to share screen.
Excellent.
Hope everybody can see that. So I'm going to pick up the baton.
Yeah, it's working great, Ken. It's working great.
That's perfect. I'm going to pick up the baton from what Susan and Ed have said. And in particular, I'm going to focus on what was said and what was not said on October 13th and how we can understand that. I think there's some good news in that the province has now incorporated a lot of the wording and ideas that Waterfront for All and Ontario Place for All have been advocating all along. But I think we have to look at those words and the actual concept and the state of play and see how they measure up. And in fact, this raises more questions than it provides answers. So I'm in black. What you will see is a series of parts of the presentation by the province, and in red, some of my questions. So I'm going to start with the private sector investment of $500 million, a very serious sum in capital on the site. But the question is, where is this $500 million applied, and who is paying for, and this is a quote, the recreation facilities, public space, parks on the 2/3 of the site freely accessible to the public. So if the site is 155 acres, 2/3, let's say for the sake of argument, is 100 acres, where's the $500 million going? Is any of it going to the 100 acres? And if not, what is? From the development principles and objectives that are laid out, the restoration and adaptive reuse of the pod complex and Cinesphere. So here again, the question is, who is doing this? How is it being paid for? Who is executing this part of the plan? When would it happen? And where is the heritage conservation plan that would presumably guide this work, which is standard procedure as per the World Monuments Fund? Preservation of Trillium Park, upgraded and coherent public realm with a focus on accessibility and sustainability, public access across the site, enhanced waterfront access and activities, swimming, boating, dining, recreation, etc. This all sounds really good. But again, the same unanswered questions. Who is doing these parts of the revitalization? Hasn't been identified. How are they being paid for? Who is implementing these parts of the plan? And when would that occur? This is a section on the government contribution. The Ontario Place will be development ready for the private sector partners, including full site servicing, soil remediation, site access improvements, flood mitigation, public realm construction of all non-tenant areas. The province is leading the field work, environmental assessments, public realm planning and design, and heritage approvals. The province will not be making any financial contributions toward the design and construction of any of the partners' proposed facilities. So what does development ready mean? Does that happen in advance of the partners coming onto the site? Presumably at the same time. How is that being done? And then all the same questions of who is doing that, particularly the public realm construction of all the non-tenant areas, the 2/3 of the site. Where is the budget for that? And who is paying for it? And who is preparing the designs for that 2/3, the majority of the site? And where is the community engagement that would lead to that design for that very substantial, let's call it 100 acres? Public access, again in black, quotes from the presentation. So this all sounds really good. Across the site, the public realm, including open spaces, trails, landscaping, seating, signage, gathering spaces will be upgraded. The 2/3 of the site free and open to the public, modernize the site, inform tenant design, and ensure seamless integration, which aligns with the Ontario Place vision and supporting public realm standards. Advanced site master planning, ensure integration with other development work streams, ensure health, safety, and accessibility standards, create a unified experience across the entire site. So we never see where exactly are these areas forming 2/3 of the site. What are they counting? Is it the parking lots, the water lots? Where is the plan that shows this? The Ontario Place vision that is referred to up above. What Ontario Place vision? There has never been such a vision, to my knowledge, put forward. What public realm standards? Again, never seen them. Who is ensuring the seamless integration and alignment? And how is the master planning, which is called for, being advanced? By whom and when? Heritage and environment. This too sounds pretty good. Ontario Place is identified as a cultural heritage landscape of provincial significance under the Ontario Heritage Act, finally acknowledging that, along with Trillium Park, which was once described as expendable. It has now been added to the City of Toronto Heritage Register. As noted, an adaptive reuse study, environmental assessment, heritage impact assessment, and strategic conservation plan will be prepared by the province with the city engaged as a stakeholder. Public consultations on public realm design and development heritage will begin next year. So again, I mentioned, where is that heritage conservation plan, which presumably needs to be done prior to a master plan in order to inform it? What about the heritage landscapes, the Michael Huff components? And who at the province exactly is going to prepare those heritage plans? So you've seen this diagram already. Eric showed it. What we see is, or what we've been provided, are the photorealistic, very seductive renderings that Ed showed for these 3 individual facilities, the Therme Group, Live Nation, and Eco Recreo, but we never see any plans. Where are the plans, presumably, that these renderings are based on? And most significantly, no master plan, nor any conceptual plans for integration of these 3 facilities within the 2/3 of the site that remains public space. In short, when you put all this together, the cart is clearly before the horse. The province has lately acknowledged a lot of the things that we've been calling for all along, all those very positive statements, but nonetheless is proceeding with these 3 private sector tenants, apparently, who have been selected and allocated specific areas of the site, it seems, in isolation and in completely in advance of any preparation of a master plan, which apparently has not even started yet. Now, about the 3 facilities, they all claim to be Therme, Eco Recreo, and Live Nation, all claim to be affordable. But affordable to whom? Some of the early indications of the cost of entering these facilities sounded pretty steep. I don't think we heard much more about that, but for example, admission to Therme was described as $40 for a single adult admission. And when you add to that a family, this is not a place that you would visit very often for most people. So what is the nature and the height of the paywalls that will be surrounding these 3 facilities? How are these sites going to be fenced off within that larger 155 acres, and for what periods of time? And how was all that determined without any master plan? So here's a statement: we are listening, and a lot of good statements about seeking input, the survey, these various sessions that the province is holding. People are asked to comment on specific things they would like to see. Desire for health food options, accessible designs, shaded areas, walkways, trails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is this is listening, yes, but apparently after the fact, when the key decisions seem to have been made and the 3 major deals have been struck. So what the province seems to be looking for is input on refinements when the main design directions for Ontario Place are anything but clear at this point. Another statement: we are engaging, but this is just the start, and it speaks about extending the public consultations into 2022 and 2023 about a whole variety of issues. All sounds good, and it should be at this point, given where they are, given the fact that there is no master plan, nor even a clear indication of how the master plan would be prepared. It should be just the start, but it's really not. There is passing reference to Exhibition Place, but no real indication of any thinking or design on integration, which must be a critical part of any master plan. And what about connections to the new Ontario line and Exhibition Place station? What's really interesting is that the timing for the opening of the Ontario line and the creation of the station, which will be a major multimodal station with 15-minute headways for electrified all-day GO service, with the Ontario line, with the 509 LRT, is a short distance away. But what about connections between that major public transit node and Ontario Place coming through Exhibition Place? Exhibition Place itself is going through a master planning exercise. Why do we not see any indication of the integration for the 2 sites, the 192 acres of Exhibition Place and the 155 acres of Ontario Place? That would be an obvious thing that any prudent government developing the site would do. So here are my conclusions. While the words are in some senses encouraging, there's a serious credibility gap between these words used and the actions still being taken. The problem is that they've gotten way ahead of themselves. As I said before, the cart is before the horse. The sequencing is wrong, and there seems to be no real commitment to the public side of the equation, the 2/3 of the site that they speak about. This leads me to say that this is an opportunity. It's not too late for a fresh start that fresh start needs to begin with two things. One is an acknowledgement that Ontario Place is primarily and fundamentally a public park and a critical part of the Toronto Waterfront Park Network, and Eric will speak more about that. And secondly, that Ontario Place is internationally recognized as one of Canada's most important contributions to 20th century architecture and landscape design. We now need to do this successfully. We need to take a step back to move forward. We need to put a hold on the commitments to these three private current actors. There needs to be a public-facing master plan and a means to implement it. We have to create that master plan, which has been identified by the province as the context for the private entities as part of a larger implementation strategy for the entire site, including a robust budget. It needs real public engagement in creating that plan, and it needs a serious commitment to a means of implementation, a governance model, and as I've said, a public sector budget beyond the $500 million coming from the private sector. So it turns out that we have an entity, which Suzanne mentioned, Waterfront Toronto, that was specifically designed 20 years ago by the three orders of government, the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, for this precise purpose, and that its designated territory, which you see in the plan on the left, actually was extended to Dowling Avenue to include Ontario Place and Exhibition Place as part of the waterfront. It has already been on the site. It, in fact, delivered to us the award-winning Trillium Park as a demonstration of what it is capable of doing in this area. It has the confidence of the public and a reputation for quality and a track record for sustainability and inclusion. And it seems more than obvious that Waterfront Toronto should be brought in. The province is one of its three major shareholders, should be brought in to actually undertake this effort to prepare that public realm master plan, which would integrate any private initiatives and provide them with a context. And if you look at the work that Waterfront Toronto is currently doing in the Portlands, the Lower Don at the other side, and if you look at their diagram, actually the two bookends to the waterfront extending across the harbor are in fact Ontario Place, Exhibition Place at one end, and the Lower Don and the Portlands and the Leslie Street Spit at the other end. This is an extraordinary project. It's one of the most significant projects in the world that's being undertaken. It's being done on time and on budget and to universal applause, actually. So we have that organization here. As I say, it's one of the best in the world that has been created for that purpose. Why are we not using them? So those are my findings.
Thank you very much, Ken. Appreciate that immensely. I think that was very, very important for us to understand that. It was very helpful to have that critical analysis of what the government has put in front of us. And now it's time for us to turn things over to Eric Klaver. Hi, Eric.
Hello. Thanks, Edward.
You're welcome.
Great. So I'm a landscape architect, but I won't go into a long history of the landscape of Ontario Place, even though there is one. But I do want to make a few brief comments focusing on how we got to where we got to now with regards to the Ontario Place landscape. And I'm really pleased. I can see that Walter Kem has joined us, as well as Bridget Huff, which is amazing. That's so great. So I'm going to fumble around for a second, share my screen.
Yeah, it's good.
Are we good? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So the presentation we saw last week raises a lot of questions, as Ken mentioned. Ontario Place was founded as a showcase for Ontario. So where is Ontario in their concept? The consortium of private companies are from Austria, the US, Quebec. There are palm trees, as Suzanne mentioned. There is seemingly nothing showcasing Ontario. And secondly, where is the place? So the architecture Any one of these proposed buildings could be anywhere, and the Live Nation development, in my opinion, is better suited to the C&E grounds than dominating the landscape as it does. And the thing I think we have to remember foremost is that Ontario Place is a park. Landscape architect Michael Huff worked with Eb Zeiler to create a park and to create landscape and architecture in dialogue with each other in a park, not a mall or a park-like setting, not a commercial entertainment real estate development. And in the original concept of Ontario Place, landscape was bigger than the site. It wasn't an ornament. It was an ecosystem that the human and non-human are a part of. And Huff worked meaningfully to connect landscape to the lake and the lake to the city. Water and trees were always foregrounded wherever you were in the park. These weren't afterthoughts. And at the time, it was one of the most highly developed parts of the Toronto waterfront. And then following that lead over the decades, east and west of Ontario Place, the waterfront of Toronto was increasingly brought to life. And here you see the Humber River pedestrian bridge, which was built in the 90s. And then since the 80s, the Harbourfront Centre has been developing under the eye of Waterfront Toronto in later years. So, and now Ontario Place is a gap in the chain of highly developed green spaces along the Toronto waterfront. And that gap is significant and needs to be connected. And that gap was partially filled on the east edge of Ontario Place by the hugely successful Trillium Park. And you would barely know it exists in the bid and proposal documents. Land Inc., led by Walter Kem, designed Trillium Park and produced a master plan for the Toronto shoreline subsequently from the mouth of the Humber to and including Ontario Place, essentially continuing the gesture of Trillium Park across the site. This is what a vision looks like. This is what a master plan looks like. This is where everything should start. This is what, in Ken's words, this is what a horse looks like. And the plan integrated Ontario Place. It built on its legacy, is in keeping with the design excellence that has been implemented over the decades throughout the Toronto waterfront. So in general, when it comes to parks, there are three important components for creating a park in an increasingly dense urban context. So first is connection. You want to connect the park not just to the city, but to the ecosystems that they are part of. You want to integrate it as green infrastructure. And following on that is two, which all those things contribute to greater resiliency. Fewer floods, less damage to urban infrastructure in the face of climate change. And possibly most importantly, three is community. So great parks build and strengthen community and are places where diversity in all forms can thrive. So there are already excellent examples along the Toronto waterfront of great parks that implement these principles. And the Portland development is one of them that's underway, and the other is Corktown Commons. So once again, in the original concept of Ontario Place, landscape was bigger than the site, and we need to plan it as such. And we need to remember that it is a park. We need to keep asking questions. We need to keep asking why none of these things have been considered and planned before we look at rejuvenating and investing public money and turning over a significant part of a public park to private interests. Thank you, Edward.
Thank you very much. Ed, would you like to pose a question? Mr. Ed Hoare, would you like to pose a question to our panelists?
Yeah, I'll pose a question kind of this way. As I was looking through the chronology of Ontario Place and reading a little bit about it, I was struck by the fact that there's a kind of a continuum, I guess, between a park on the one hand, of the kind I think you're describing, Eric, and on the other hand, a theme park or an amusement park, which at the other end of the scale would be kind of like Disneyland or Canada's Wonderland, where you've got substantial investment in rides and amusements of various kinds. And it seems to me that somewhere along that continuum, there's a place where governments do a great job and are obviously the appropriate party for parks in the sense of, you know, even animated parks, of which we have many beautiful parks in the city, and the government should be in the business, and it does them very well, and we've got great new ones on the way. But is there a point at which the the government is simply not good at a certain kind of park? There's a certain point where it becomes a kind of an amusement park. There's too much infrastructure. There's too many amusement rides. There's roller coasters, whatever the heck it is. And we're talking about something where the government just shouldn't be involved. And does that mean that we should therefore say, okay, let the private sector turn over and handle some of it? Or is that a sign that, it's just not an appropriate thing for us to have on the waterfront? Is there some kind of a point on the continuum where private involvement makes sense? And where is that point? I'd just be interested in what the three of you might have to say about that. Start with Ken.
Okay, I'll jump in it. I think we have to talk a little bit about what we mean by a park. And I am assuming Eric would agree with me. It's the balance between the free and publicly accessible and the presence of nature and the ability, the dolce far niente, the ability to come without spending money and to do what people want to do in the space. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be things that you pay for in the park, special things that occupy in time and space certain parts of the park. I mean, even in Central Park in New York, you had two of the most successful restaurants. You have the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which sits in the park. And I like to think of Ontario Place and Exhibition Place as one enormous park, 350 acres, in which there is a soccer stadium, in which there is a convention center, but where the whole has this sense of being a big enveloping public space that is park-like in character. So that's the first thing I would say. And I think that is a kind of 21st century park. We're not talking about a bucolic 19th century version of a park. That this is something new and different. I think what happened here, Ed, if I go back to your description, your trajectory, and I know this because I worked for David Crombie when he was representing the provincial government back in 2007 on an attempted merger with Exhibition Place. And so I went through all the studies that were done. Somewhere after the initial euphoria about Ontario Place, its initial success, it somehow came to be seen as a piece of real estate to be monetized. And a whole series of accounting firms were asked to look at how could you monetize this asset, which led down the path to some kind of theme park or attraction, as opposed to a park. And what we tried to demonstrate, and Suzanne mentioned this with the HRNA study, is if you think of all the great cities of the world, think of Millennium Park in Chicago, think of Chapultepec Park in Mexico City, think of the Bois de Boulogne in Paris. The economic value of those parks for their cities over time is far greater than any short-term value in turning over a space like this to be monetized as a real estate asset and throw up the paywalls. And so I think it's a miscalculation of what it means to be a park. And then to your last point, do governments know how to do this? Well, we have proof of concept in Waterfront Toronto. The two images that Eric showed of Corktown Common and the Lower Don, guess what? They're being done by government, and they're among the best in the world. So we have the skills, we have the capability, we know how to do that with by engaging the public. We know how to build these spaces, we know how to design them. We have transformed the Toronto waterfront, starting with Queen's Quay, the transformation of Queen's Quay, Sugar Beach, Sherbourne Common, Corktown Common, all the way along the waterfront. We have a great track record in doing this. So it's not as if governments, our governments in particular, don't have that competence.
Anything to add, you other guys?
Yeah, oh,
Go ahead.
Suzanne.
No, go ahead.
Well, just
Go
to
ahead,
add to
Eric.
what Ken, I'll be very brief. I just add to what Ken said. I think there could be a private role in public space, but it shouldn't sort of encumber or get in the way of the enjoyment of the park of your average, community member or visitor. I think in retrospect, Ontario Place tried to compete with things like Canada's Wonderland. And ultimately, maybe that was a bit of a folly that in the sense that maybe what the private sector's role is that, okay, so Canada's Wonderland is there. There are other amusements that are there. Now, Ontario Place was created at a time when they didn't exist. Maybe when they came around, rather than doubling down on the original idea of an amusement park, they actually should have slowly divested of it and created a more public space. So it has to be looked at. Like I said, the landscape there is bigger than the site itself. So you have, when you do these visioning documents and do this master planning, you have to look at everything that's on the table in order to understand how this park is, what this park means and how it's going to function in a city.
Suzanne?
My frustration is that, this is not an either or, but rather a how. And the idea is that, can you imagine this conversation happening around High Park? And I think that there would be a lot of people very, very upset. So I think the idea is what Ken has already spoken about. And the same thing with Highline Park and Central Park, that this is the overarching. And within that, you can have private sector revenue generation spots. But I think the whole idea is that going back to, since this was started, like anything, it needs to be stewarded. And I think over time it was just neglected. And now I get the sense is, how do we offload this rather than embrace it and nurture it back to something that's vibrant? I mean, we've seen it now, it's already happening with COVID, with people out there every day, and Trillium Park. And there are people that still don't even know about Trillium Park, but I have to put a plug in for Walter Kem. If you ever get a chance to hear him tell the stories. And I was thinking of you, Walter, the other day when I saw the rock that was quarried for the kids to climb all over, and the stories that you tell around about getting that and visiting that family. It is priceless. And so I think that that's something that belongs to all of us, and we don't ever want to lose that. And I think that there is an opportunity to still have this dialogue. And so, is the provincial government great at this? Maybe not, but we can help them. And we've got some examples, and we've already talked about with Waterfront Toronto. And I think that oftentimes we always want to look outside our borders for something grander or richer. Well, guess what? Waterfront Toronto is world renowned, and they have won awards for the work that they have done. So I think that we should invite them to the table and to get them to help. Because for years, we didn't have a provincial partner. There was no one bureaucrat or no minister that wrapped their arms around this. So I think that now's the time. Don't give it away. Just bring it back, and you can outsource pieces of it. I think there's still some financial opportunities, but I think that what they're doing now is it just screams, let's just get rid of it. And again, like anything, we need to start with the master plan.
Yeah, there's
Thanks,
a sense
guys.
of selling the family silverware here, which
I think one of the reasons why Trillium Park is so great is because it is a park. It seems like a park. You use it as a park. It's not trying to be Canada's Wonderland. That maybe is why it's so great. Anyway, let's move on to the next question.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Ron, Ron Jenkins, one of our esteemed board members and one of the tight crew that helps organize our speaker series events. Ron, did you have a question that you wanted to throw out there for discussion?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Okay. What struck me in a number of the comments in the chat that I've been sort of watching scroll by has really to do with sort of the essential Ontario-ness of Ontario Place and how much that is seemingly lost here. And this seems to be the image that a lot of people see and find problematic. And you know, we see palm trees when we think of Ontario as pine trees and so on. And really, you know, it's probably a matter of point of view and time frame. Because really, when you look further back into Ontario's history, what you will see is that, which is really a joke. But, you know, I think we're really sort of treading on the idea here of some kind of theme park that doesn't belong. And anyway, that's all I've got. So carry on with other
Well,
questions.
It looks like a Mediterranean corniche. You know, it's not an Ontario landscape.
No, and it shouldn't be a Jurassic Park spa either.
Yeah.
Can I just add a comment about the Ontario-ness? I mean, it really is shocking when you think that John Robarts and William Davis were so proud of this province and saw Ontario Place as an opportunity to showcase this province to the world. That's what it is all about. And it was inspired by Expo 67 and all, you know, Montreal, demonstrating what it was about, and then all the countries in the world with these magnificent pavilions that some of us remember. The fact that it seems to be in the current set of proposals, not a single Ontario thing that's worth showcasing is absolutely remarkable. And then as some of us were preparing for this, we thought, what if, just to take a simple example, the food, the music, the wines, all of the things that are particular, the arts, all the things that are of this province, not that we're not open to the rest of the world, but talking about something about who we are and what we're becoming, which was the original idea back in 1970, 71, but bringing it up to date would be such a different place to start than reaching for things which are so different, and so particularly when you have three of them. I mean, it's really snubbing us in such an extraordinary way to, Eric, as you pointed out, to still call this Ontario Place.
I think there's an opportunity here, and I'm trying to be optimistic about this so-called process with the government and their version of consultation. So I was talking to our colleague earlier today, and this idea about really what is true public consultation. And so right now what they've set up is we're going to talk at them, they're going to listen, they're going to give us the survey, which is absolutely benign. But I'm hopeful because they're talking about the rollout for when they're actually going to have shovels in the ground. So I'm optimistic in thinking we haven't signed the contracts yet. The other piece is that the City of Toronto is engaging, and they're going to be doing their own public engagement. They are striking a working group. So I'm optimistic that we still have some runway where we can start to walk them back from the cliff about this non-Ontario and to get them to really think about it. And so again, as they started, when you think back to when Jim in December 2018 first made that comment to where we are right now, their rhetoric has definitely changed. So I think that there's still some opportunity. But I don't think there's anything wrong with calling this whole thing around maker's hand. So everything, it's either make it, bake it, or grow it, or something that has some creativity. And going back to how all of this started, and I think it'll be a great thing because there's still some revenue opportunity. And I think to educate the government that I can do things there in the wintertime. I don't have to be underneath a glass dome and swimming in this pool. There's this other water or winter sports that we can do. There's skating, there's snowshoeing. And for Ed Hoare, who likes to be out there kayaking 365, he can be out there too with the swimmers. So there's lots of opportunity.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, just thinking about what Ron said and what you were saying, and Ken, I mean, we have seen, especially with the pandemic, but we've also seen, because of real estate values and the fact that we are late to the party and realizing that some venues that may actually technically be private sector in their form, I'm thinking here of live music venues, for example, right? Or privately owned galleries and things like that are facing a serious crunch in terms of being able to survive, especially the way the property tax regime is. And, it strikes me as so when Suzanne says revenue opportunities, I mean, I think one of a glorious evening I had many years ago, you can't get more Canadian. Well, it wasn't entirely all Ontario, but I saw Bruce Coburn at the Forum. And then we walked over to the old Waterfall stage and saw, I think, if not the first, it may have been the second time great Vancouver band Spirit of the West played. And it was, a gorgeous, beautiful late summer evening. And yes, we spent money on beer and someone was making money and we bought stuff and we had to pay to go to the Forum, et cetera. And that was fine. But it was just, that it strikes me that part of you might say the slightly commercial side of the older Ontario place is perfectly viable. And if anything, I think perhaps we need it even more now than we did then. So I've got.
If I remember too, there was an acoustic
ahead,
aspect of the original Forum that you didn't even really have to go into the Forum to hear the music. Like you could
That's
sit
right.
outside of it and you could hear it, right?
You could sit on the hill, you could sit in your kayak. And we were talking about that today. David Crombie was telling me that when the Forum came down and 400 trees were cut, that Ed and Michael Huff were weeping in his office. It was just the saddest thing. But the idea is that, that's a lesson learned. We don't ever want to do that again. And I just think that, for everyone just to pause and reflect, do we really want palm trees on Lake Ontario? Let's just think about that. It makes no sense. And people coming from other parts of the world, do they really care? If I'm coming from Austria, do I really want to come and look for that palm tree on the lakeside? I don't think so. I know when I'm traveling, I want to see the indigenous flora and fauna, not something that's brought in. That is just so trashy.
But look, there is a place for botanical gardens. We
Yes.
have gardens, which is wonderful. But I think as Eric pointed out, it has absolutely nothing to do with the Toronto waterfront.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's the odd thing. I mean, let's say for the sake of argument that such a facility, that spa, could appear somewhere in the GTA. Wonderful. But why would you give the West Island of Ontario Place over to a use like that when we have on the other side of our waterfront, Bring Back the Dawn, which is all about restoring what was the largest and greatest wetlands on Lake Ontario, with such an attention to our environment, to our climate. It just seems, the contrast is just too painful.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to actually program note. So I've got some people who put their hands up, and first person. So Suzanne, I see Suzanne Cross. I'm going to get to you, Suzanne. Just hang in there. Chris Glover, a member of provincial parliament, sent me a note. Chris, are you? I'm just. Do you want to? I'm going to unfind you here. If you put your hand up, Chris, you'll pop up to the top of the screen if you use the hand raise thing, and I will get to you presently. Chris, here we are. Okay. Chris, go ahead.
Chris, you're on mute.
No, it's the second microphone I gotta turn on. I wasn't on mute,
it's
the second
one.
microphone was not on. But anyways, I want to thank all of you for organizing this, for all of your advocacy around this. Eric, Ken, Suzanne, this and everybody. This was a really good presentation and lots of food for thought. You've all heard me say this before, but other people in the audience won't. Before I was an MPP, I was teaching a course on the history and economics of Ontario. And the first question I asked the students was, what identity do you hold first and foremost? And I asked, is it Canadian? Is it Torontonian? Is it Ontarian? Is it something else, right? And nobody at the beginning of the school year ever chose Ontarian. But by the end of the year, people would choose it. Some of the students would choose it because we talked about the history of this province, and we do not celebrate this province enough. And I've heard you mention today, that we don't have a place to celebrate. And that's what John Robart's vision for Ontario Place was, that we were going to showcase Ontario. And the Michael Hoff and the Eberhard Zeidler were Canadian architects, landscape architects and architects. All of the steel was, that went into it was made in Ontario. They went around the first year, they went around the province and hired young people from across the province to work at Ontario Place so that there would be this incredible celebration of this province. And nothing in what's being proposed celebrates Ontario. And the real shame of it is we lose an opportunity not only to showcase this province, but to launch the careers of another generation, like Eberhard Zeidler and Michael Hoff and the Playscape designer, whose name escapes me right now.
Eric McMillan.
Right. Their careers were launched with Ontario Place. They got an international reputation from Ontario Place. Same with IMAX. This was IMAX's first permanent space. So we have an opportunity here with Ontario Place to relaunch it and to relaunch, not only to showcase the province, but to relaunch careers of Ontarians, and of Ontarian architects and landscape architects. So I really do hope the government will reset. I know lots of you have been involved in this. I've written an op-ed in Now Magazine talking about this should be an opportunity to showcase Ontario Place. We wrote based on the feedback that we got, based on the meeting last week with the government, we've asked specific pointed questions about what is the government's commitment, financial commitment to this? How much is the taxpayer going to be on, paying for? And what is the benefit? Like, what is the actual site plan? So we've asked those questions of the government. And so that'll conclude my remarks. I just want to say, though, that David Crombie is on the call. And I really think we should call upon him to say a few words, because he is a guru for many of us, a mentor for many of us in this city. So it'd be great to hear from David at some point.
I agree with you completely, Chris. I would be thrilled, Mr. Crombie, if you would like to speak. I will spotlight you. Hello, Mr. Crombie. How are you?
Hello. Shame on you for asking me, Chris. But I want to say that, and I do want to say this. I've been delighted as I listened to people trying to retrieve the past so they can put it into the future. And what's been missing is that nothing stays exactly the same forever, but the song of Ontario Place is the song of Ontario. And Ontario is not an isolated place. It's connected to the rest of Canada and North America and the world. And that was really the dream. I was there when people were talking about it. The dream of Ontario Place was to place Ontario at the center of itself in relation to the rest of the world. That has been forgotten. And so when I hear the debate, the discussion tonight, it gives me heart. It really does. Don't back away. Please don't back away. It is a fight, because the people who are thinking that they've got the new Ontario Place that you've now seen trot out by the provincial government, they are absolutely on the wrong track. They are at the pine trees. The palm trees are just not an accident. It's a kind of don't really care about the Indigenous reality. It's about moving the show wherever you can get a crowd. So please, please don't back away from Ken's original notion, other people, and Ontario Place, Exhibition Place is part of that. To not include Exhibition Place is to like going on a date and forgetting who you brought with you. So don't back away from that either. It is hard to do. We tried and we failed. It was hard to get it going. But I'll tell you, the magic that's now coming in the William Davis Park section, that's a reminder that it's still possible. Please don't back away. Fight them. Bring in Waterfront Toronto is a really good idea. It's a really good idea because it's the one entity that can speak for governments and for publics. So please go up with that. So there we are. I'm more heartened by it. I was talking to Suzanne earlier today, and I was a little down in the dumps about the damn thing. But as I heard you all, I heard Ken again. Ken has a magic about not only what needs to be done, but a way of telling it. And the rest of you have really made an enormous contribution. I just want to make sure you're not going to back away. Fight the fight, because the opportunity to turn Ontario Place into what it wanted to be with the changes that time brings, that's the project. And a lot of Ontarians, Canadians, and the world will say, we understand what's unique about you. And that's to be celebrated. So good on you guys. It makes an old guy feel good.
So we should do what David said. So, keep writing those letters. And I just want to make a comment in the chat. Bridget, I think you owe me a glass of wine, but I think the idea of Tanglewood is fantastic. And I think that those are the ideas that we need to start sending in. And again, once we get more information from the City of Toronto and they're real, and David always talks to me about what dialogue is. And I think the city will be very interested in dialogue. And so those are the ideas that we can bring forward. So thanks. I'm excited. I think that we still have an opportunity here.
I have one challenge I could leave you with. Find John Tory.
Oh, yes.
Meet with John Tory and put fire in his bones.
John Tory. Is he the mayor?
John Tory can make the difference if you get him going.
Yeah.
You have his phone number.
You got to
right,
get him
David?
going. He's not going to want to hear this, but I'm telling you, he can make the difference if he puts himself out there publicly to fight the fight that you guys are fighting.
Thank you, Mr. Crombie. Appreciate it. Appreciate it very much.
Wonderful.
Now, one thing that just came up, one question, Suzanne, this came up, and I'm also, Chris, I just unmuted you too, because you are a member of provincial parliament. The question is, so a couple of people have actually through our event dashboard or what have you, have taken the opportunity either prior to or even during the meeting to do the survey and have said that they thought it was kind of lame, off point, and not very helpful. Sorry, I'm just reporting. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just reporting.
It's a government survey, yeah.
Exactly. But the question is, who should they write to if they want to send a message, with their own comments and own thoughts, which is always important. To whom? I'm going to throw this at you, Suzanne, and also to you, Chris. To whom do they write? And if we know someone particular, perhaps we can put that out there.
Well, here's the pickle.
Chris?
Yes,
Suzanne.
Chris, go ahead. You're the elected.
Chris, you go ahead first.
I mean, you can write to the premier, you can write to Lisa MacLeod, the minister. I would start with those. I would CC my office because I am the local representative for the, of the riding that includes Ontario Place. And that way I can gather those emails as well. And then I can start to read sections of them out into the legislature, and so we can create some momentum that way. The group is absolutely right. Like, I used to be a researcher. The survey has all kinds of leading questions, and it's not a survey that's designed to actually solicit feedback. It's a survey that's designed to direct feedback towards a certain goal that's already been, a decision that's already been made. So, I think rather than doing the survey, it's better to send letters, but CC my office so that we have a copy of those as well.
We went through the same experience with the survey with the community consultation for the Foundry. And so, Chris and I have talked about this many times, the idea of write the letter to the premier and to Lisa. But here's the other thing. Everyone here on this call may be within the GTA. And quite frankly, those letters going out are just going to sit there. Here's the power. Everyone has a friend in Guelph or Sudbury or a relative in Thunder Bay. And we need the people outside the GTA to start these letters because, and I'm sure that there are staff here from Infrastructure Ontario listening to this. But the idea is that this part, when this all started, was for everybody in Ontario. And so we need for the province to understand it's not just us sitting in this bubble but it's all of our friends and family throughout the province, and it is a huge impact. And I've had this discussion before with people who live outside the area, but the idea is, it could happen here, it could happen to Science North, it could happen to any municipality that has sitting in their purview a provincial asset. So the idea is, if, it could be Ontario Place, it could be somewhere else in Guelph or in Orangeville or in Thunder Bay. So it's the idea, the same thing with the Foundry and with the First Parliament site. Everything just seems to be happening where I live. So it seems like, I'm this person who's out there activating all the time. But the idea is that this is a provincial asset and we need to keep it that way. And it needs to be public. And we're not afraid to talk about, revenue generation. But first and foremost, this is a public asset.
Can I just suggest, and I want to pick up one of the virtues of having Waterfront Toronto involved in this. If we're writing letters, I think we should be writing them to all three orders of government simultaneously. And I say that because if you look at the larger picture from the Exhibition Place new multimodal station down to the water's edge in Ontario Place, and you look across the waterfront, all three governments have a lot of skin in the game. And all the puzzle pieces are just lying there waiting to be put together. So from the investment in transit, which is the only way to get rid of all those surface parking lots, and that's what Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario talk about, for God's sake, which would free up the land. The master planning, which is going on for Exhibition Place, which is all about doing the kind of transformation we're talking about. Ontario Place itself, the connections across the waterfront, all the way from Humber Bay and beyond, right across the harbor, right over to the Lower Don and the Portlands. If we address all three levels of government and say, you have all created this magnificent entity with 20 years of track record, which is designed to put these puzzle pieces together. Here you have an amazing opportunity to do so. And the benefits of doing that are enormous. I mean, you can't free up the parking lots that are on Lakeshore Boulevard and overcome the barrier of Lakeshore Boulevard unless you're working with the city and the province together.
Right.
Not possible. And the federal government is involved in funding a lot of what will make that work. So I think that now, rather than at this point narrowly focusing on the province, I think we should be addressing all three. Chris, I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, Ken. No, it really does, because you're right. You look at the Port Authority just across the water from Ontario Place, you look at the entire waterfront, and whatever is developed there, if it's going to be something that actually celebrates this province, it's going to need funding and support from all three levels of government. And you're right about the integration of Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. It only makes sense. And it's been something that's been begging for decades. So I think you're right. And I think that is the direction the conversation should go in.
So I guess we're having a meeting tomorrow.
Yeah. 6 a.m. at Ontario Place. Who's getting the coffee? Who's buying the coffee? Okay, thank you very much. Now we do have some more. I think we've had some questions. I'm gonna Deborah Knight. You've been looking at the chat. I've been glancing at it too. Are there some questions that we want to either give people a chance to put their hands up and ask, or to read out from the chat?
A lot of things in the chat now are comments. And so I think we should take a question from the group on Zoom, and I will scour the chat again for a question.
Okay.
Ed Hoare has a question.
Ed,
Okay.
you want to? Hi, Ed.
Hi, I don't know. I guess I have a question. And it sort of is along these lines is, it's extraordinary how long it's taken for anything to get decided here. We've been in limbo about this for 9 years, and may go on longer. And you know, one of my, and that seemed extraordinary. I don't think anybody expected that when the park closed down in 2012. And I'm wondering if any of you can tell us sort of why you think that has happened. Why is it so extraordinarily difficult to come up with a plan for Ontario Place? And one of the things I will just sort of note as a kind of a sidebar as I ask the question, with respect to Ken's comment, is that one of the reasons Waterfront Toronto was set up, of course, was to overcome inertia caused by different levels of government. That was the whole idea, right, behind the Fung report and the original creation of Waterfront Toronto. So if we hand it over to Waterfront Toronto, could it be said, I don't know, I would ask your opinion, does that mean that we might overcome the extraordinary inertia and difficulty we seem to have in reaching a decision as to what to do here?
Ed, I would have to say that the complexities and the difficulties here of coordination of efforts are very similar to what Waterfront Toronto accomplished in the Portlands with the Lower Don, with all the conflicting jurisdictions, with all the complexities, with all the need to align 3 levels of government and the Conservation Authority and all the different ministries. That's what they do. That's what they're really good at. They have the context, they have the track record. And you know, and what's so fascinating is that when Waterfront Toronto was created 20 some odd years ago, and somebody drew that map that I showed, it was imagined that they would play a significant role here. That's why the map was drawn, to include Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. And you know, one other thing I'm going to say is, how did we get into so much trouble, and is it so difficult? I think the problem is, and this is what I meant by the cart going before the horse. I think if you look at all the statements that the province put out in that slide deck the other day from the 13th, all of the right statements are there. It's just that they started off on the wrong foot, and they're now trying to graft onto that somehow all the things that they should have done first. Exactly. And I think if we can help them, and that's why I use the term step back to step forward, they seem to be saying they want that master plan. They seem to be saying they want to do the heritage conservation. They want to do all those things. They want to address all those issues, but they're reluctant to say so far, or they're very silent on the fact that the private sector is not going to pay for that. The private sector essentially is paying for their own facilities on the footprints that they've been allocated. And so, you know, if all you have to do is look at the costs of great parks per hectare or per acre, and look what it costs to produce Trillium Park, which is probably not a bad example, and then multiply that over the remainder of the site, and realistically identify a budget and get Waterfront Toronto to do what they do, and it would be a great investment. There's no question about it. Why we're so reluctant to admit that you're going to do something public as a public purpose?
So the other thing I should also mention is that we still have, there's another meeting coming up October 27th. And so for people who didn't attend the October 13th one, that's another opportunity to have this dialogue with the province. But I think also too, to what David was saying, and Ken, there's an opportunity for us to circle back and to talk both to the province and the city, and then engage the feds and see where we're at. So again, I'm still optimistic, the fact that there's a long window before they say the shovels will be in the ground. So for me, I'm looking at that as an opportunity for us to band together and to go back yet one more time and to start that conversation. I mean, I know that Architectural Conservancy of Ontario has had success with some meetings, so maybe we can bring them to the table to see if they'll let us into the tent. So.
Right.
I also support David's point about talking to the mayor.
Yeah, well, I think he should come with us.
I mean, the city has 4 members of the board of Waterfront Toronto.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And they're a major shareholder here, and they're the owners of Exhibition Place.
Yeah, and the fact that
I've got a couple.
Secretariat's pulling together a group is a good sign. So yeah, there's some fodder there for next steps.
Okay, we're just going to cut in. Deborah, you have a couple of questions from the chat.
Yes, I do. So the first question is, okay, what if Ontario Place were to become another of Toronto's great neighborhoods, where people lived on boats and floating homes next to Ontario Place? This would enable it to become a year-round neighborhood where people could live, shop, work, and play. What do you think?
You know,
who wants to take that one on?
I will say, I
Harbor
think
City.
what we have, yeah, we had that with Harbor City. We had that idea. I think we have a extraordinary need for public space.
Yeah.
With the way in which the population has grown we're the fastest growing city and city region in North America. What we've seen over the last 19 months of people trying to occupy every inch of the Toronto waterfront. And the fact that we were poised to spend $1.2 billion, I think, for 23 acres of Rail Deck Park.
Yeah.
To address that need. Well, here we own all the land already. All the land is in public ownership. I think Trillium Park is proof of concept and the fact that it's not only Trillium Park, actually, for anybody who's been to Ontario Place in the last year and whatever it is, 8 or 9 months, every bit of Ontario Place, even with 0 improvements, is full of people trying to use it as a park. So I really think that trumps the idea of building a neighborhood there.
Yeah, I think there's already neighborhoods there's already neighborhoods that connect to the park. If you go to High Park on any given sunny weekend, it is jammed. It's jam-packed full. And so where are the people from Parkdale going to go? Where are the people from Liberty Village going to go? They need this open space. They need this green space.
And that's one of the things that we've noticed now with the opening of Trillium Park and with the Davis Trail, and Walter can speak to this as well, is that because of all of the density that's gone in around that area. So 50 years ago, it was in the middle of nowhere, and now it's surrounded by thousands of people. And there's almost waves of what happens with the park. So in the morning, as Walter says, you know, there's the stroller brigade and the young moms coming out. And then there's the runners at the beginning of the day and at the end. And then there's yoga going on. So physically, you know, it's a space that we do need. And I think that, you know, I'm at the east end of the city, and we are clamoring for public space. And so, you know, I will go to Ontario Place just to get some green space. And so I'm one of thousands of people, and I don't even live in the area. So just by osmosis, it's become a district park for so many people who live in the area.
Well, I mean, if you think about also, I mean, I live in Birchcliff on the western section of the Scarborough Bluffs. I mean, this past year, if you had attempted to take a motorized vehicle to Bluffers Park, you had to come at 4 o'clock in the morning on a weekend, right? Because it was sealed off by the police by about 6 a.m. And the only way down was to walk, bike, take the weekend TTC bus that only runs in the summer on the weekends. Or in fact, if you're a member of if you have a boat there, you get a special pass. But it's basically because, I mean, there's this demand, and that's true whether you're at Etobicoke Creek or whether you're at the Rouge River, right? It's true all across the waterfront. There has been a tremendous upkeep. Also, you know, some of you downtown folks, which my former friends and neighbors, have discovered the Scarborough Bluffs, much to everyone's chagrin. Damn, go away. Ed Hoare, I'm looking at you, Ed Hoare.
Darn that connectivity.
Yes, another question.
Well, here's a bit of a U-turn from Alan Weschler. A cursory glance at the Toronto.ca lobbyist registry online search reveals a number of recent additions aligned with Therme, one of the proposed developers. While not entirely surprising, perhaps somebody can do a deeper dive into the registry and dig around.
Yeah. And so we know that Therme has been trying to come in here for years, and they were looking quite seriously at the Portland. So we've seen that. Yeah, we've done the dive.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's something we're going to talk about I guess we can talk about that when it's appropriate to. I just wanted to say, Walter Cam, hi, Walter. I see you there. How are you? Walter gave a fabulous talk. One of the things that will be on our soon to be realized YouTube channel was Walter's fabulous talk earlier this year. Walter, did you want to weigh in and say a couple of things? Because we'd be more than happy to have you do that.
Thank you. And what an interesting evening. Is my audio working?
Yes.
Suzanne, I have so many more
Unclear.
voices of the people from Ontario Park to tell you about. My big vision is that of Toronto becoming a botanical city, a forest city, to which we're dealing with 40% canopy bylaws and things like this. But we already have the Bluffs. We have Tommy Thompson Park as an urban forest. We have the Toronto Islands as basically an urban forest. We have Ontario Place as the urban forest. I call Ontario Place now cottage country because the 400,000 people, we've just finished a series of surveys. The new people have moved to Parkdale and Liberty Village and Bathurst neighborhood, all within 10 to 15-minute walks, on average incomes of $88,000. They're not going to buy a home in the Muskokas. So we're going back to the 1920s when public transit went to Sunnyside, it went to Long Branch, it went to the beach. We had cottage country in the city, and what goes around comes around because we're facing the same economic issues today. And it's even getting worse because if you look at the Christie Cookie site with 16 new buildings with 15,000 people with 2 acres of dedicated park space, 2 acres for 15,000 people. Where are those folks going to go? And they're going to go to the Humber. The plans I'm doing now for the Humber, they're going to go to an expanded forest, Ontario Place, the extension of Trillium as the essence of what the rest of the site could be. Green, clean, accessible, natural. The people make their places. People speak about just being informal, being in nature, nooks and crannies. Kids, they don't need playgrounds, they have the boulder wall. This is the kind of behavioral imperative we can build in that is going to be very affordable and useful for people in the years to come. The forest is going to be here with us. And that's how we fight the real world resiliency, because we're now dealing with global warming and trees and oxygen. And how do we deal with water runoff? How do you deal with runoff in these huge glass monstrosities that could be anywhere? What is the genius loci for Ontario Place? I don't need a climbing wall in Ontario Place. It belongs where in the middle of Regent Park where the kids are. I don't need a spa here. I go to a community swimming pool. And you're quite right, Ken. I think it's $50 a head. For 4 people, that's $200. If you go to Canada's Wonderland, you're looking at a family of $400 or $500 to go to Canada's Wonderland. Hello, what economy are we living in today? So I think it's time to get real about public policy, public accessibility, public stewardship of forest and green space. I think that's all I want to say right now.
Thank you so much, Walter. It's great to see you again. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Appreciate it immensely. So are there any more questions out there? Because it is 8:46 and we do need to wrap soon.
There is a question about cycling, if anyone knows if that will remain there, that it's a really good and long route at the moment. Any comments on that?
Do you mean, I think are we talking about being able to cycle through the site along the water's edge?
Yes,
there was a comment about that earlier.
That's the
too.
question. That's the question. Yes.
I think there probably will be. I mean, there's a bridge that could be an extension from the Martin Goodman Trail that would go around the edge. Because there's no master plan. In fact, there are no plans that show anything like that. We're only guessing.
Yeah.
But my worry is that you will be skirting around the edge of fenced off areas, which you have to pay to get into. That's a completely different experience from, I think, what we need and want. But I mean, the real problem is it's just incredible to have done this presentation after all this effort going back to the initial selection, I believe in 2000 or Ed, remind me, 2018, all this started, and there's still not one shred of evidence of any thinking about a master plan or a process to create one, which would have answered that question.
Yeah. I think when it comes to biking along that edge, when you sort of look at the renderings that you see, I think there's going to be a lot of threading the needle along the edges of this of Ontario Place to try to get the public through certain spaces, and and there's no plan there, as Ken's saying. Yeah.
So Walter Kem asks, the West Island has significant landforms and mature forest trees. What will happen to them?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah, and that's a concern. So when we look at the renderings from Therme, those trees are coming down, and that's why Ontario Place for All sent out that media release saying, pine trees versus palm trees. And it's just, it is ridiculous and it makes no sense. And the idea is that, again, we've been trying to get Mark Saunders to come out with this. And I think the more walkabouts we can do, we just finished doing one with Waterfront Toronto with Quayside, and to physically get people to that site for them to actually see what we're talking about, I think is so critical. And so, again, we've had Lisa McLeod out for just a brief period, but we need to get her and her team out to physically see what this looks like so that they can get a sense of, see all of those fir trees. According to this, they're all coming down, and it makes no sense. And just a reminder, to go back and tell them we had 400 trees cut down in one day.
And
Suzanne, you made an excellent point. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to throw this out there.
We're both saying Suzanne's made. Go ahead.
Made an excellent point. Suzanne's great. No,
we're both saying Suzanne, and I want to build on what Suzanne's saying. So we're both saying Suzanne. I'm sorry. I thought I was still in the chat, Edward.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so Suzanne, yes, I've had a number of comments saying Suzanne making an excellent point. And to Suzanne's point about Science North, a comment is this: I would love a Science South focusing on freshwater ecosystems, ecology, fisheries, aquaculture, global warming, etc. What are your thoughts on those aspects?
Actually, we talked about that a while ago. And again, when we were doing the visioning with way back when Sidewalk Labs was still a proponent with Quayside. And the idea, and Ken touched on it too. So you've got the Don River at one end, you've got the Humber at the other. And then as far as all of these, we had Mars up north. And then to do something here on the waterfront, Swim Drink Fish is another group that we were talking to. And the idea to do something on the West Island to celebrate and do some water research. And again, bring people to the waterfront. There's no reason why we can't have swimming there. Right now, it's not allowed. So the swimmers that are out there are contraband swimmers. But there's lots of opportunity. And I think that part of it too is to be visioning about what can be done. Because also too, there's going back to the pods. Those could be a great space to do some water research, and still within the grounds, there's still some opportunity for revenue generation. Again, going back to my initial point, this is not either or, this is how. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to regenerate, not to go back to what we had before because that ship has sailed, but to reimagine and to vision. We've got this great asset. And what do we do here? I think it's the easiest thing, and forgive me, but the laziest thing, just to offset and to download this to these three proponents to say we're done. There's not a lot of creativity there. And so I think that as citizens of this province, we need to take this process back. And so that's why I'm asking, please go and write the letters and give your ideas from anything from Tanglewood to Science South. I think that always, and even when I'm working locally with developers, we know our community. And so we're the ones that give the input. And oftentimes when we work with developers in my immediate neighborhood, they often say we have a better development application after real community dialogue or consultation.
So with that, Donna Teggart asks, what's next and how can we help? What are the top priorities, please, for the letter writing? I'm assuming she's referring to the letter writing.
Well, as Chris Glover mentioned, get that letter to the Premier and to Lisa McLeod and just articulate what you envision for this. And again, if you wanted to, you could copy in Chris, you could copy in Ontario Place for All, and we could start to accumulate all of these ideas. And again, we'll take them to the City of Toronto because they're starting their stakeholder advisory committee and their public consultation. So I think the idea is, again, take it outside of the GTA and get your friends and family to start writing letters as well. Or what I do is I write the letter and I say, sign this and send it off, because the whole thing goes by postal code, and that's how they figure out whether or not they have a problem. Again, it gets back down to politics. And if anything comes from an M5A or anything else, they just say, eh. But if it's coming from O or P, now we've got their attention. So, and again, we know that this works. We've had some success with the Foundry. And so that's what we need to do.
I think a lot will hinge on whether or not they have signed contracts
This is true.
with these three entities, because and some indications are that they may not have. The way this was described by the minister on the site a while ago was that negotiations were continuing, that somehow this consultation, however shallow it is, was going to inform the process before those deals were consummated. If we can head this off at the pass before that happens, then I think the idea of a reset is possible. If they have, or when they do sign those contracts, there's no doubt that the province will be sued for breach of contract.
Right.
If something different happens, which could become a major stumbling block. So I think we should really focus on trying to find out when or what the process exactly is, and to at least get a pause so that that doesn't happen, which gives the opportunity for a second thought.
The other point that I wanted to raise too, and one of the things, and again, I'm uncomfortable speaking publicly about sort of a public political campaign, but the idea is this government wants to be liked, and so they can do the right thing, or we can tell them loud and clear that you are annoying us, and we will get together a campaign. And we're good at that, and we've done it. And you can see through different examples of different discussion and burning issues where the province has had to backpedal. So I'm happy to provide a bike that will provide backpedaling. I'm happy to run that campaign.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because now our chat is on fire.
I have to go now.
Thanks, Suzanne. We'll send you a list of questions tomorrow. Okay, in the spirit of sharing information, Chair, just let me know if you want me to continue. There is some information sharing in the chat. That's quite interesting.
Excellent. I've sent around the link to that point about the October 27th government consult. So I sent the link around that in the chat to everyone. I really wanted to seize one more time, just before we close, on the importance of place and being there. Suzanne, you talked about that. Eric, Walter's spoken about it eloquently tonight, and before Ken, you've talked about it. But there were a few, I feel I must represent some, so there were some opposing views, shall we say, or alternative views tonight in the chat. Some of those people did not stay around, unfortunately. So I mean, people have to leave. That happens. We know you're here for a while, and maybe you got to go and make dinner or something. But a couple of people sort of went like, "Why is this so political?" It sound one person said, in fairness, I drive by, it looks derelict. Why isn't this a good thing? Something's happening. Why are we being so nasty and critical about it? And I thought about that, which is a perfectly fair viewpoint to have if you wish. But I think that one of the things that struck me in that remark is I drive by, or even if you bike by fast and you don't stop, right? No, seriously, because I mean, I've been on that section of the Martin Goodman Trail, and I almost, and felt, and thought, oh, is that a cyclist going by? Wow, I thought, it was like so fast. But I mean, if you don't go there, you don't know. If you haven't been there in 10 years, you know what I'm saying, Suzanne? And I think that's part of your point. So I think that if we want, because I mean, there are probably members of the public that we need to, well, I think most of us are, there's probably a majority opinion here this evening that's, kind of merging in a consensus, but it isn't just the government we might need to bring into the discussion. It's other members of the public maybe they haven't been there since 1989. Maybe they haven't been there since whenever. You know what I mean, Suzanne?
No, it's a good point. And Paul Bedford and I were talking about that the other day. So all the work that he did as the city planner, no one has been, there are people who live north and have never seen the wave decks or seen the waterfront. when I tell people outside the city where I live, they think it's still a railway corridor. And the fact that, you know, there's the David Crombie Park right outside my front door. So I think part of it too is, in all fairness, I mean, if you have not been to Ontario or Trillium Park or the Davis Trail, you would think, what's going on? It's derelict. The pods are there. The paint is rusting, all that kind of thing. And so if you don't know, if you haven't been there, you would have no idea what has happened out there. And that's the same thing with anything. You know, I've had this conversation with different folks about public assets. Even if I buy a brand new car, I still have to maintain it. It needs an oil change. So the fact that any park, I know of no park that you just cannot leave alone. It always at a minimum needs some sort of maintenance just because it's new. And so what starts to happen is it's like that theory of the first broken window, and then one thing after another, and then it slides. So it's, again, you know, we've got to have the political will. We need the bureaucrats and we need the politicians, for whoever is in power at Queen's Park. It doesn't matter. It's just that we need to make sure that they are engaged and understand the importance of this public asset.
Last year, we actually had I belonged to a book club, and we actually had a book club meeting at one of the fire pits at Trillium Park. It was amazing. It was so great, and we were able to have a face-to-face meeting outside, socially distanced, around a fire pit. It was great.
Okay. So we were going to ask. So we do think there's some point in people filling out that somewhat lame survey, do we? Do we think there's some point in that? We've shared that, and we're happy to share it again. Suzanne, do you think there's some point in doing that?
Edward, I just want to also point out that there is a letter that has been shared. Thank you, a template letter here that's been shared as an online form in the chat. So if you don't know what to say, you just use this template letter. So that could be of use for some people. And
Thank you.
will the dashboard be open like tomorrow for people to access resources? Edward?
We can leave that open. We can leave the link to the
So we could-
dashboard open.
We could post some of
Yeah.
these excellent articles and links that people
Yeah,
are
we can
giving
do
us,
that.
right? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we can also have a link to, we can also have that information replicated at the waterfrontforall.ca website as well. Some of those ideas and information.
And you can also drive them to Ontario Place for All as well.
Yes,
Suzanne,
we
are
can do
people
that as
invited
well.
to the October 27th meeting, or did they have to RSVP to anyone, or?
My understanding
on
is
the list?
they have to register, and so that's all the province of Ontario. So if they can Google that, they can register for that public meeting.
And I just shared that link right around again too. Yes, I think you have to go to the website link, which I just shared again, and register to be allowed to attend.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Chair, we're wrapping up, but it's 9 o'clock, and if you want to take
Yes, it's 9 o'clock.
a few more questions before we
Um,
leave, it's been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks for your great
I-
work, Ed and Deborah, in pulling together the Zoom stuff, and all our speakers. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody who joined in.
thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Great to hear from David
Thank
Crombie
you.
and Walter
Thanks,
Cam as
everyone.
well. Chris Glover, member of Provincial Parliament, thank you for being with us. Thanks for everyone who came and stayed with us. And again, look for, yes, we will. For those of you who have the link to the event dashboard, we'll leave that up. We'll post some more information there, and we will also update some information on Waterfront for All. And thank you very, very much. And good evening. Pleasure to see you all.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Good night. Good night.